Well, it's that time again, that time when we have a seat at our favorite booth, have a conversation about Absolute Ministries. I'm joined today by Ken and our special guest, Cameron Birk, and I'm your host, Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. You know, Ken, it occurred to me that we should probably come up with a punchline. I mean, we have the joke, but we never have a punchline. Do you notice that?
Yeah, I guess that could help a little.
Yeah, it just seems like we're always lacking in the punchline department.
Speechless, as it were.
Or jokeless. Maybe that's what it is jokeless.
Well, Greg's not here, so we don't have to worry about the risk of dad jokes.
Yeah, Greg is not here. So theoretically, the episode should go much smoother. Theoretically. I mean, is that going to happen? I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll find out today if Greg is the weakest link.
There you go.
It'll be confirmed today.
Is that the punchline?
We can, yeah, we'll email him in Hungary and tell him,
guess what?
You are the weakest link, Greg. You are the weakest link. Did you ever watch that show?
I did.
I never did. I remember the catchphrase, but I never did watch the show. You are the weakest link. Did they vote him off the island?
That was back in the early days of reality TV, wasn't it?
I don't know. The only old reality TV that I even remember is The Apprentice. And the only reason I remember that is because you see Trump's face all the time. So
didn't watch much of that.
I didn't either. The only thing I remember out of it is you'll find. Well, that sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You'll find. All right. So anyways, today we're joined by Cameron Birk. But before we get into it, it's everybody's favorite part of the episode, our favorite segment. People have been just thrilled with the addition of this new segment called The Disclaimer. Take it away, Ken.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the respective speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, policies, or doctrines of Athol Baptist Church and its members.
We definitely needed that because I've heard that Cameron is quite the provocateur.
This will be controversial today.
Hey, good morning. Good morning over there.
Sitting right here.
Oh, hey, Cameron. Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be with you guys.
Yeah, glad to have you, man. Really appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about the ministry that you're in.
Yeah,
just
appreciate that.
A 30,000-foot view.
Sure. Well, it started out of my life. I was totally broken, in desperate need of saving, had wrecked myself, and encountered Jesus in a highly structured program in Western Washington. And alcohol and cocaine and really whatever I could get my hands on had just consumed my life. And I was 20 years old when I went into that program, and I met God there. There's really no other way to describe it other than I bowed down, right?
Yeah.
I literally got over myself. And in that moment, God began to transform me as I surrendered to him. We hear that term all the time.
Yeah.
And that began the journey. That began my journey into what became full-time vocational ministry and walking out a response to God.
That's awesome. Did you have a religious background, any at all, growing up?
I was raised in a Christian family. Yeah.
Mhm.
And actually some Baptist roots. My grandpa founded Baptist Theological Seminary in 1950 in Denver, Colorado.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that wild?
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was one of 4 that traveled from Michigan and founded just outside of Denver.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. So
You got some pedigree,
I
I suppose.
that came to mind as I was driving over here. I was like, oh, I got to talk about my grandpa. Shout out to Grandpa. Yeah.
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 Wow, that's
So-
impressive.
Was raised in a Christian family, and I knew all the things, but it wasn't on the inside.
Yeah.
I was just going through the motions, and that did not last. Right?
Yeah.
It
It's
was
kind of a thing for a topic someday, isn't it? You know, you come from a deeply devout religious family, Christian family, generations of faithfulness, and one kid can just go off the rails.
Yeah.
And
I mean, do you mind if we get personal a little bit?
Send it.
Yeah, so that's deeply interesting to me because I'm kind of in the same boat. I grew up in a deeply religious family. My dad was a pastor, and then at some point I just kind of went off the rails. I have my own reasons for that. I've kind of shared my own testimony on that. But like, what do you think it was that was the thing that just kind of drove you off into the bushes, as it were?
Yeah. Well, affirmation's a big deal, and being valued and having that spoken into your life. And I think I always needed that. And my parents are excellent, and provided well, really well. But regardless of how good your upbringing is and how solid your parents are, et cetera, or not solid your parents are, there's something on the inside that, and we hear it all the time, but only God can satisfy. And there's that deep longing for like an affirmation that only God can fill. And I didn't have that. I was searching for it, and I was athletic. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was a varsity wrestler, and I actually got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes my sophomore year of high school. And at 16 years old, athletics was identity, right? And getting that diagnosis, having to live in the hospital for a week, begin taking shots, can't eat what I want to eat. The doctors are like, telling me this is your life going forward.
Which is really rough for a wrestler because you're like weight gain, weight drop. I mean, that's like part of the game.
Yes,
Yeah.
1,000%. And what I heard the doctor say was, your life is over.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
And that was crushing. And so that really tipped me over.
Yeah.
And as a 16-year-old inundated with peer pressure in high school, I just gave in. I was like, well, screw it. Here we go.
Yeah.
My life's over. That's what I heard as a 16-year-old. So
Might as well speed up the process.
let's go.
Yeah. That makes total sense. So yours was really kind of more internal, based on your diagnosis. Yeah. It's interesting to collect these kind of different ways that people drift away from faith because it's not always the same. And we have this kind of mentality that, like people that go away from the church, it tends to all be the same. That's at least what we think.
Mm-hmm.
It's because church was hypocritical or because, they treated me poorly or, I had, I wanted to live my own life kind of thing. And it's just like, it's never really that reductive. It's always fairly complicated, like most people's lives.
it's easy to blame external factors
Mhm.
on it. I'm the victim. I would have been okay if not for X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So that led you into a little bit of a darker lifestyle.
Yeah. I started smoking weed and drinking, and actually didn't graduate with my class out of high school. Just didn't go to school. I did everything else. And was just chasing fulfillment in whatever avenue that took. And it was a total cluster complete mess.
Yeah.
And lost multiple jobs, could not maintain employment, wrecked a car drunk in the morning, cheated death a number of times, and really a miracle. Let's just say it, that I'm alive.
God had a purpose for you, obviously.
Yeah. So at 20 years old, had just cheated, suicide, and did not want to live. And I got a phone call one day, and it was the director of this program. My parents had already been talking to him, and actually my dad had asked his brother, who was a pastor up in Mount Vernon, Washington, just told him, hey, Cameron's destroying himself. Like, what's out there for individuals? And so he told him about a program called Adult and Teen Challenge. And so they looked into it. I ended up getting a phone call one day, and it was the director, and he just asked me a bunch of questions, and that was actually the beginning of a process that led to walking into the doors, taking a tour, and looking at this facility. I had no interest in going. I was there only because my parents wanted me to be there. And we walked through the facility, and we sat back down in the director's office, and the director sitting across the table from me and my parents on both sides. And he said, well, Cameron, what do you want to do? And I said, not this. You're nuts.
That's fair.
You're nuts. Like, you're going to control my life, which desperately needed controlling.
Yeah.
And I stood up, went out in the front yard at 20 years old, lit a cigarette, and my dad followed me out there. My mom started walking around the facility praying. And my dad said, I'm just not going to continue to really facilitate your life. I'm not going to continue to put a roof over your head, et cetera, and watch you destroy yourself. And I began to consider what was my life. And this was the Lord already beginning to work on my heart. Of course, I didn't know it, but I began to have the ability to be introspective. And in my current state, that's a miracle, right? I was a complete mess. And I began to consider my life, and I actually asked myself the question, like, what would it look like if you jumped into this just 100%? And I pictured myself standing on the edge of a swimming pool, just this visual I had. And instead of dipping my foot in, or just testing the waters, like, just commit. Full send, right? 100. And when I did that, I heard God. I'd never heard God before. It wasn't audible, but just crystal clear in my heart and in my mind. And he said, Cameron, give me this year of your life and watch what I will do in you. And I turned and looked at my dad, and this was over the course of about an hour, as I was trying to convince him to reward me for going into this program, right? Like,
right.
if I go into this program, then, ABC. And he said, no, you have to do it because you want it. You can't do it because of anybody else, even Mom and I. And so I got introspective, and I heard from God, and I said, all right, let's sign up. So we went back in, signed up, went in a week later, and was really living by the grace of God during that week. Overdosed a number of times that week, and which is wild in and of itself, having experienced God like that, right? You'd think like, oh, everything's peaches and roses. But I was still completely broken physically and emotionally.
Yeah, it's not the way addiction works.
Right.
Yeah.
And got to the intake by God's grace. And that was September 8th, 2003. Yeah. And about 3 days in, recommitted my life to God, just in a pile of tears. And that was the beginning. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
So the ministry that you're working in, Absolute Ministries,
Yeah.
what is it that you guys do? Because obviously it has a lot to do with your background and who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What is Absolute Ministries? What do you guys do?
Yeah. Well, after I graduated, so I'll get there. I'll set this up a little bit. After I graduated from Adult and Teen Challenge, which was a 13-month program for me, it's a year program by the book. I knew God had transformed my life, right? I had a new outlook, a new perspective, a new heart, new desires, new motives, but and really a desire to assist other people. Now had a heart for what God cares about, right? People.
Right.
And was offered an internship. So I did an internship, which was another 12 months. When I agreed to it, I didn't know how long it was. That's like the Lord, right? Like, yes, this is what I have for you to do. How long is it? Another
Pretty typical.
year.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes forward. Son.
Yeah. So was there another 12 months as an intern, developed more responsibility, more leadership ability, and then left, worked for a church for 6 months in the high school and middle school, and then went back to school, finished high school during that time also, enrolled in college, and Teen Challenge came back to me and said, hey, we want you to be the next director at the Seattle program. And I could not deny my roots, so I went back, gave a 2-year commitment as full-time staff, and wore a number of hats during that time for the organization. And again, grew like crazy, right? We had upwards of 30 men, 18 to 65 under one roof, and just providing intense structure, high structured environment for their life. And rebuilding relationships, teaching them how to live in that highly structured environment. Excuse me. And during that time, watched a lot of individuals be very successful in the highly structured environment. And it's like residential inpatient, right? One step down from the structure of jail or incarceration. And they would do very well there. And they would leave, right? And everybody's happy. Mom's crying, dad's crying, grandparents are crying, sons and daughters are crying. Mom did it, dad did it, little brother did it. We're so happy for you. And unfortunately, when individuals would get out of that highly structured environment, that structure that was on the outside and was put on them by staff was not fully built out on the inside of them. And I watched individuals that I had poured my life into, that God had literally poured his life into, fall on their face.
Yeah.
Over and over.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make a comparison between the two, but I've seen that happen to guys who were, say, for instance, on probation.
Yep.
You know, it's the same kind of scenario. You know, while they're on probation, they're clean and they look like they're getting their act together. And then as soon as they're done with probation, they're just like off the cliff.
Yep.
You know, because like you were saying, there's no inward structure to reflect the outward forced structure. Almost kind of similar to the way that we used to do church. You know, it used to be that you would tell people, well, you need to dress this way, you need to have this haircut, you need to talk this way, you need to listen to this kind of music, and try and alter the outside enough that it would make them change on the inside. And there's probably quite a few people that left the church because, well, they just never had that inward change. You know, They got tired of living outwardly in a way that didn't reflect the inside.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I've seen that happen in several instances in just different arenas. So it sounds like there was a definite change that was needed.
Yeah. So when I met Amy, when I went and worked at that church in the high school and youth department, my wife, we got married in 2008, and I was still working for the program, and we got a house and we were going to move in, do the newlywed thing. And God spoke to both of us super clear and said, no, I want you to begin housing and mentoring these graduates who don't know how to live. And so we actually moved into my parents' basement and used our house to start the organization in 2009. And we were in my parents' basement for about 2.5 years while the organization just got legs, got off the ground. And and got going, got guys in it. We existed on paper for the first year and a half, right? Just trying to get established, and then actually opened and got guys in. And that was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and max of 4 guys, 2 guys to a room. And over the years have grown now to over 15 dwellings in 2 states.
Oh.
Yeah. So
how do these dwellings work? I mean, well, what's the process? How does their like normal life look like? Because these are people who have come out of programs, and they're entering into like regular life.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So an individual that comes out of a program, number one, they've established that they don't want to live that old way. Right.
Right.
So we've established motive, which is key. That's critical in an environment that's not going to be highly structured. So we do have full-time staff. We do have schedules, and there's expectations. But from day one, the understanding is you want to live in a new way, right? Yes? Yes. Okay. So that means you're teachable, right?
Right.
And so in order for us to take steps forward, you have to be willing to walk. We will walk alongside of you, but you also have to be willing to walk and be teachable, be moldable, and have your ears open. And as individuals are willing to do that from day one, they come in and we have an interview process. There's an application process. And right out of the gate, they're immersed into an environment where other individuals are willing to be honest, willing to be transparent, willing to say, when asked the question, all right, raise your hand if you know you suck, right? Everybody raises their hand because we all know we're human and need Jesus. If you know you suck apart from Christ, obviously. Right. And now we have new identities. But that's the cornerstone bedrock is I know I need to be different. I want to be different. How do I walk this out? And we have a full-time team that's paid full-time to be in their life and walking with them through every facet. So, just considering some of the things we do. So obviously housing, but then also the job placement. So individuals, they don't know how to go get a job, right? Most of the time, that's a generalized statement. And we take individuals that are 18 and up. So people are adults. I guess I should talk about our criteria really quick. So 18 and up are not a registered sex offender or registered arsonist, convicted arsonist rather. An individual that wants to follow God, is willing to work full time and be teachable in all areas of life. And so it's a niche, but it does serve a broad people group this day and age.
Yeah.
And so full-time job placement, and it's not uncommon for us to get people jobs a couple of times, right? A guy or gal in this situation, season of life, they get a job. They might lose it. That's okay, right? That means you fall forward, progress. All right, what are we going to do different next time? And that's very common. And we walk with them through this process. Yeah. Also, transportation. We've got about 25 vehicles that are in our fleet that we fuel, maintain, and insure. And they drive an average of about 600 miles a day. Every day, running all over the place from employment, back and forth, to appointments. And these they don't have driver's licenses a lot of the time. And so they're dependent initially on us.
Yeah, so you have volunteers that drive them around. Or
full-time staff.
Full-time staff.
Yep.
Okay.
Full-time staff. And in the midst of that, discipleship is happening. Because what are you doing when you're in a car with somebody?
Captive audience.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. And it is not so much early morning, 4:30 a.m. on the ride to work. It might be a little more quiet.
Yeah.
But relationships are built.
Mm-hmm. And we gain the ability to be trusted, to speak into somebody's life and to say, hey, I've been where you're at, and I love you. Yeah. And you can learn to live in a new way. And we pick them up every day from work. We take them to their Department of Corrections appointments, meet with their PO, probation officer, take them to child visits. It's involved because each one of these guys has got so many facets of things going on. And what people don't often understand is that once you get into a situation where you are in the system, more or less,
Yeah.
it's really hard to get out.
Yeah.
Like exponentially hard to get out of the system.
That's right. I actually just read an email yesterday. I won't name an agency, but for people get community service hours, right, as part of their situation on the other side of a conviction and what they're sentenced to. Okay, so you got to do 100 hours of community service or 1,000 hours of community service. I just read an email yesterday from an agency that said, in order to do that community service, so the sentence was 100 hours of community service, you have to pay $80 just as a qualifier to be able to qualify those 100 hours of community service.
Yeah, like how do you...
For what? Isn't that wild?
And then how do you do that? I mean, you're just coming out of
right.
I mean, if you're just coming out of jail, for heaven's sake, or you're just coming out of like a situation where you've had a drinking and driving incident or you've been caught with drugs, it's not like you likely have gainful employment at that point. So
no, they're literally telling them, go volunteer your time as you're on day one of getting out of incarceration.
Yeah.
You're mandated to 100 hours of community service.
And pay us for your volunteer time.
Pay the government for your volunteer time. That's right. Yeah. So one point of brokenness.
Yeah.
There.
Well, it does appear. I mean, I got a little bit of a beef in that kind of thing because I've seen that happen to people where they just get in this system and, they get done with the judge and then the judge hands them down this sentence. And even if it's light, even if he's cutting them a break, it's like, you got to do this community service and you got to go to this class and you got to do this thing. And then they send you on your way. But there's no clear, procedural step 1, step 2, step 3 for these guys to follow. And so they get out there and then they honestly miss something because they just didn't know it was there. And man, I've been sitting in court and watched some guy get the book thrown at him because he missed this class.
Yeah.
And he's like, what class?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It is a system that I believe wants, obviously, the best for people, but it doesn't happen without relationship.
Yeah.
And so you can put a structure on somebody, you can demand something, but they're all alone. They have zero ability to walk that on their own. They need a life coach, a pastor, invested person who cares about them. Now, the system calls it a probation officer, but they got a caseload 1,000 people long, right?
Yeah,
so
that's not possible.
it's just
for them
meeting
to
a
do that.
standard, and it's tough. It's tough. Statistics say it's, like you mentioned, very tough.
Yeah, well, and then it's just not successful in doing what maybe they intended for it to do. If you ever done any jail chaplaincy, one of the things they'll tell you is well, we're all about rehabilitation, and it's like, okay, how?
Yeah.
How are you about rehabilitation? Because I don't see a whole lot going on.
It's easy to go down a rabbit hole about current perspectives from the government on harm reduction models, medication assisted treatment, which gets into a whole host of conversations, big pharma, et cetera. It's a wild space right now.
Which makes something like what you're doing even more important because it gives them a spiritual landing place as opposed to just continuing to be kind of bound in the system.
Yep. Yes. And so as we're walking with them in establishing, safe and stable housing, they have a community there's the commonality, not only of a past in addiction or a life-controlling issue, but also a desire, like I mentioned earlier, a new motive for living. And as individuals live and exist in that space, there's an acceptance, right? As it's regularly talked about, as they're regularly confronted in a positive way with the gospel, right? They're confronted with their humanity, yet, okay, here's how you fall short. Here's how we all fall short. And now, because of Jesus, here's a new path forward and a new way of operating. We've actually coined a phrase as part of our authored material called ugly honesty. And it is that we are ugly in our humanity, But if we're honest, there's grace and mercy in the midst of that. And it really just means getting ugly honest, getting real about your stuff so that you can start actually getting some traction and moving forward and let that stuff be in the past.
Yeah. Would you say that's kind of one of the things well, I guess first of all, I should ask, are there any other programs out there that are similar to this that are doing kind of the same work that you guys are doing?
So we have a, in one word, no.
Right.
We have a franchise opportunity and model, and where we have authored all the materials for other individuals that feel this call to facilitate what we do. And we started one through that process in Kalispell, Montana, and they've since taken the model and rebranded. So technically, there's another organization out there doing it, but they started as Absolute Ministries. It is very unique, and it does span the gap, really, and it's a big gap between the high structure and then freedom that individuals actually want to live real life in and be on their own. When somebody initially comes to us, they're very dependent on us, from the transportation to the staff interaction, near nonstop around the clock. I mean, they literally, as part of their process and our staff philosophy, like, they're with a staff member pretty much 16 hours a day for the first week. Like, hey, man, you're with me, right? And that's for everybody's best. As they get their feet under them, as they feel comfortable and start to get their legs under them. So, yeah.
Do the staff members stay at the residence with the residents?
Yeah, not in the same house most of the time. We've got, actually, it's all over the place. So some staff are offsite, and that's more our admin staff. And we've got other staff that are on site in another residence, but adjacent. And we've got other site staff that have their own room inside one of the houses, and then other members are in other rooms of that house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys are like filling that gap, like you were saying, like between, absolute constraint and absolute freedom.
There you go.
Which, one of them, either one of those is, well, one of them definitely is desired, but, without kind of like some transition, absolute freedom can become an absolute constraint at some point. And so you guys are definitely filling that gap between those two things. What are if a person enters into that program, they have to come from some place where they have already had that kind of restraint, already had that kind of, I don't want to use the word programming, but they've already kind of went through that structure to build that structure externally. That's something like you guys look for right off the bat, or have you guys just taken people that you've interviewed like right off the street?
Yeah. Initially, it was started with that in mind, and that's a great qualifier. However, we've since changed slightly in being more case-by-case basis. And so sometimes individuals, now they do have to have demonstrated 30 days of clean time. That is a standard we hold. But an individual could come out of a situation, have 30 days clean time, and if they meet all the qualifiers, not necessarily have gone through another, like you're talking about, program.
Right.
And by and large, the vast majority of the people we currently serve have come out of another program.
Right.
And we are not the easiest option. That's another qualifier. The individuals we're serving are, they're genuine in their desire, right? If somebody's desire is just to get by, which individuals on the non-resourceful side of the addiction spectrum, that's a lot of individuals, right?
Yeah.
If your desire is just the easiest path, let me find that, then you're not going to be interested in coming to Absolute. However, if you are sick and tired of the path that you've been on, then you will be interested in what Absolute has to offer. And I liken it to somebody going to the gym. You know, nobody's going to the gym who loves the couch and loves the bag of potato chips, right? Like people that are going to the gym they're paying a monthly fee.
Mm-hmm.
They want to push the bar. They want to run the track, not because they like the way it makes them feel initially. Like it sucks. It's painful. It's difficult. But they know that if they exact that discipline out of themselves, good things will come on the other side of that. And so we help individuals push that bar every day. Individuals that want to push that bar every day. We've got a spotter right alongside them every day, helping them push that bar, saying, come on, bro, you can do it. Let's go. Let's go. Right. And those individuals, that's the people group that we are catering to. It's intentional. And I think it's actually, when we talk to our supporters and individuals that make the organization go financially, that's a huge piece that makes it attractive, is that donors' dollars are being invested in a people group, not a soup kitchen, not a handout, not a just so you can get by, but in a people group who's wanting to go to work every day, in a people group who's demonstrating good faith, right? They're paying tuition monthly to cover half of their cost. And then our generous donors are willing to look at that and say, wow, I want to partner with an organization in the kingdom of God who's advancing the gospel and helping people who were a drain on society now be a tax-paying, contributing member of society and building the kingdom of God at the same time. It's an extremely attractive thing when you look at just from the outside looking in. You know, we did some numbers this last week and some stats, and over the course of Absolute Ministries, we have put back into the system over $58 million back into local government, state government, and federal government of savings by the services offered. SAMHSA came out with a stat. It was a late, I think, 2019 study that said every dollar invested in addiction and substance abuse recovery saves society $7.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you look at the amount of investment that we've done into people and just sheer numbers, right? It's a tremendous, tremendous impact that the organization has had on our community and society. Yeah.
Well, that brings up an interesting question, because is there like a comparable social service that's provided by a city, municipality, county, state, whatever, that helps people to do this type of thing?
Not at all.
Yeah.
No.
So basically what the governmental agencies are doing is they're taking the initial detox, they're processing that, and then potentially sending them to places that are nonprofits, or because I don't imagine
or for-profits,
I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about that. But there's nothing in between. So then when those folks drop off out of these detox programs or whatever, and they're the type of people that aren't, they want the easiest path.
Mm-hmm.
It's just inevitable they relapse.
Yep.
And then they're right back in the system again. So that's just that those tax dollars are getting drained every time somebody goes through the program.
Yep.
Without them processing through. So that's a great kind of way of looking at a ministry like this. You know, I mean, it's like, not only are you helping the individual process out of that kind of whirlpool that they get into, you're helping them jump out of that, but you're also helping slow the whirlpool, because they're not jumping back into the system again. So yeah, it's a really great way of thinking about that.
Average drug and alcohol rehab program, inpatient rehab program, costs for a 45 to 90 day inpatient rehab program. The average cost is over $55,000.
Goodness.
Yeah. And Most of those dollars are paid by insurance. Most of them. And it depends on what the agency or what the provider accepts, right? Some take state insurance, depending on what state you're in. Most do not. However, one of our staff members in Washington, Kylie, she's amazing and runs our women's campuses now in Western Washington as the director over there. She went through, I believe, either 5 or 7 programs, inpatient rehab programs, before asking her counselor at the last one for, I would like a Christian transitional option. And her counselor Googled it, found us, and she hasn't looked back. That was, I believe, 2018 or 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's our goal, end the cycle. It is a cycle.
Yeah.
What's the role of family support structures in a lot of these cases? Are they missing, inadequate, burned out?
Yeah. I would say now this is different to the listener listening, hear me when I say, as a generality, there's brokenness in family. However, a family that is not broken does not mean you are exempt from your child potentially falling into addiction and being a bad statistic that we're watching in society right now. And you can look at families that have everything, quote unquote, right? And just look at Hollywood, for example.
Yeah, no kidding.
And materially, that is. But unless they have everything spiritually, right? And then emotionally, and then physically, not the other way around, individuals are broken. So as a generality, we find brokenness, yes, in people's stories in regard to family, but not always.
Yeah. Do you think that's one of the big battles that you fight is the kind of, how do I put this? The battle against the thoughts of materialism and helping people to kind of focus on, okay, well, it's not about stuff. It's about self-reflection. Is that like one of the biggest battles? Because it seems like I remember being in that boat at some point.
Yeah. Yes. I'm glad you brought it up. So when people come into Absolute, it's very common. Everybody's great until, they bump their head for the first time. Right. And probably throughout their time here, they're going to bump their head multiple times and just dealing with themselves and willing to be introspective on a range of issues. But a big one is their finances and how they view themselves in the midst. Somebody comes in with nothing, then we help get them into a job, right?
Which is usually what they have when they've come out of something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nothing. They come with nothing. We take them shopping on day one and fill up their refrigerator.
Yeah.
Right. And as they progress, as they begin to generate income, which is great, but a lot of times it's common for individuals to, look at their paycheck. They get a couple in their pocket. They get a couple in a bank account, which we help them also get set up. And they begin to make plans. They start to look in the mirror and go, wow, look how amazing you are. Like, oh man, look at those zeros in the bank account.
Yeah. It's kind of like you drop back into that ego.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And go, hey, I'm good. On day one, and this is actually in our workbook, on day one, you were on your face, right? You were you couldn't get over the threshold to get in the door. But for some reason, we start to be able to leave a lie on day 60, day 90, day 10,000, right? Where it's different. I'm different now. And because of my material circumstances, my humanity's changed. No, I'm sorry. You're still a human in desperate need of Jesus. And no matter where you arrive, where you get to, the zeros in your bank account, the house you live in, the car you drive, you are human flesh in need of Jesus. And for these individuals, it's common to bump their head at day 60, day 90 with this issue, right? They're on their feet. They're feeling good physically. They're starting to eat 3 meals a day, right?
You've been making a cell phone payment for 2 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you start feeling like I got it all together.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I've seen that happen a number of times as well. And what's the remedy for that? Like, is there like what does the day for one of these guys look like? One of these ladies look like? I mean, is there a structure in the house that they have to fulfill other than like work and external things that they're having to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know about your day, but mine, with just the responsibilities of living an upstanding life, I'm busy, right? I'm busy, and it's the same for these individuals. So they are typically getting up between, I'd say average 5 a.m., 4 a.m., beginning their day. And this is generalized, right? The average stay with us is about 2 years. And again, it's people are living real life. They're doing all the things. This is real living with limited structure around you. And so they're going to work every day, and they're coming home in the evenings. Now, initially, until they get their own vehicle, we're dropping them off, picking them back up in the afternoons. Initially, that usually means DOC or Department of Corrections appointments. We require them to be involved in a small group through their church, where they're building relationships, having to listen to other individuals who are more mature than them, navigate life. And then we have chapel once a week and class once a week, where we're introducing topics as well as just gospel presentations over and over. They're required to go to church. They're rebuilding relationships with their children, and they're tired, right? They're not used to pushing the weight of real living and responsibilities. And
come 9:30, you're ready to go to bed.
Hey, I'm out. See you in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, man. So you're encouraging them to find places of worship around their area that they can attend and be a part of.
Yep. Local church, local Jesus believing Bible teaching church. Yep. Denomination doesn't matter. And that's core. That's critical. And really, the goal is that after they finish Absolute, the only thing that should change in their life, and this is what makes us very successful, is that the only thing that changes when somebody leaves Absolute is literally where they sleep at night. The rest of their life has been galvanized and is set. So
they've been working to do that all that time, and they didn't even know it.
That's right.
Typically.
That's right. So it's like a bullet being shot out of a gun. They're traveling, they're going down the barrel, if you will, and they breach the end of that barrel, and they're now living life, but nothing has changed other than their immediate living environment. Now they just live literally in a different house, and yet their job's the same, the way their finances are the same, and that structure that has been put on them is now internal structure, because the workbook is 4 seasons, 4 chapters, and we call them seasons. And in each season, there's about a dozen benchmarks that they have to achieve in order to season up, to progress into the next chapter. And throughout that time, in order to progress into the next chapter, they're accomplishing those things. They're developing a new rut, right? A new way of living. And as they're doing that, they are literally building that internal structure in their life and becoming a brand new person through repetitive discipline. It's disciplines. And, these individuals, we got a graduate from, I could name a few that come to just the top of my mind. We got an individual who used to be a IV heroin user, and he's now a full-time firefighter, full-time firefighter with a huge department in Washington State.
Wow.
And he beat out thousands of individuals. That's one success story. I got another guy who was in the Department of Corrections in California, didn't see a day of his 20s, didn't see light. For one day of his 20s, was locked up in California prisons, and came to us after graduating a program in Oregon. And we got him hired a job in a school district, which is a miracle in and of itself, in a custodial. And, in 2023, he was the classified employee of the year across the entire district.
Wow.
And that's because he's in a high school where the kids who are searching for affirmation, that's an individual who knows what it's like to be a kid who doesn't have affirmation in his life, who went through dark periods of living, and now he gets to infuse the gospel and be a light and testimony in the public high school with, I think there's like 3,500 kids in that school. And because of the kids love him.
Yeah.
Love him. And all of his colleagues voted for him as the employee of the year across the entire district.
He's kind of just sharing naturally what has been internalized within him.
Just can't hide it.
Yeah.
Can't hide it. Yeah.
It's like a football fan. You know, it's like
That's right.
you don't need to ask them to talk about football. They just talk about football, right?
That's
yeah,
right.
He's become a fan of good living.
Yep.
You know, that's pretty amazing. So walk us through the workbook a little bit. Like, what's kind of the work process these guys go through?
Yeah. So an individual, when they're coming to us, you know, we've established their motive for living, and everybody gets a workbook on day number 1.
I was going to ask, did they start it immediately, or is there like a process? Like, it's like, okay, we got to get you a job. We got to get you some clothes. We got to get you, you know, your bedroom kind of set up kind of thing. Like,
yep. All of that takes place. But the workbook, it's common for the workbook actually to sit on, and it depends on the individual, but generalized statement would be it's common for the workbook to sit on their desk for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and the individuals that are the most successful work at it consistently, because that's what it rewards, is just consistent, you know, do a page a day, right? Just always be looking at the next benchmark you need to hit. And they're good benchmarks. They're things that should be going on in all of our lives. So, you know, season 1, in order to complete season 1, you have to find a home church and attend that home church for 8 consecutive weeks before you can. There's literal check boxes in the workbook. So in order to,
well, that's cool, because you're still maintaining some of that structure while releasing them into the world.
Yep.
Yeah. I see what's going on there. That's brilliant. Yeah.
So an individual goes to church for 8 consecutive weeks. Now, they can also be checking out churches, right? Because they're new. They're like, oh, I want to go over here. I want to go over here. Let me check this out. But once they determine a home church, okay, now that's your home. That's where you're planted. And after 8 consecutive weeks, you can check that box. Another thing is finding a mentor in your home church. So, you know, our big goal is to be grafted into the local church. That's the path forward for these individuals. So long after they leave the program, is relationships and to be known and know other people in and through the local church. And so they have to find a mentor. We require them to get into the small group. And then once they're in that small group, say I'm 25 years old and I'm going to a small group in somebody's house, and, you know, I know in my workbook, I'm in Absolute Ministries. In my workbook, I have to find a mentor. Oh, man. Okay, well, they told me to find somebody who's older than me and ideally who's married and looks like they're, you know, a successful contributing member of society. Like, oh, okay, Chris, oh, you look successful. And, hey, would you be willing to mentor me and, you know, be all right. Okay. Ken, would you be willing to mentor me? And so Ken says, what does that mean? Well, we've authored a mentor curriculum. So it's right on our website. At the very bottom of our website, you can go down, click the mentors tab, and we put the mentors through about a 60-minute training, like how, all online. And then they get a certificate at the end emailed to them, how to interact with this people group, generalized, right? But what not to do and what to do.
Is that something that the mentor has to pay for?
Nope.
Or so
they should. Yeah, please
Yeah.
pay for it. Yeah. But no, they don't have to pay for it. Free. And it is really the call of a Jesus follower to disciple somebody. And especially, good grief, how much better, right? If somebody's willing to come to you and say, man, I want to follow Jesus. I don't know how. My life's a train wreck. I desperately, man, let me tell you about my life. Would you teach me how to live in a new way? And that's daunting to a lot of people who are considering being a mentor, but we use the language actually of being an intentional friend. It's a little lighter. And that's what it is. It's being an intentional friend, and just being willing to walk with somebody and be an encourager 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's what they need. They just need to be encouraged.
Yeah.
Like, man, I believe in you. Like, you're doing it, man. You're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of the same kind of well, it's a little bit more elaborate than that, I would suppose, but kind of the same idea as a sponsor, someone that, you got questions or you feel like you're struggling a little bit, maybe not with addiction necessarily, but with just life in general. Because, man, life is hard enough without addiction. You're definitely going to have challenges where you're just gonna be like, I don't really know what to do.
Yep.
Yeah, especially coming into a real world from this life of unbridled freedom, and then kind of structured, this is what I must do, and now all of a sudden you're having to make your own decisions, your own responsible decisions. Good grief.
Yep.
How overwhelming would that be?
Yes. Well, and it's why a lot of people throw in the towel.
Yeah.
Like, I'm better off in jail.
What do you honestly, what is the washout percentage for Absolute Ministries? Because there has to be a little bit.
Sure.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I think probably 50%, maybe 40 to 50% of individuals who walk in the door do not complete.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not as bad as I was thinking it was going to be.
However, that doesn't mean they're not quote unquote successful in life. A lot of individuals, again, we're serving a people group who really wants it.
Right.
And so some individuals, even against our recommendation, will say after season 2, like, and some, get tempted out the door. Oh, there's a girl or this better living situation in their mind, right? It's like a lot of individuals who go to college don't finish because for whatever reason I want to go, they offer me a job and I'm done taking classes, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, probably roughly plus or minus half, don't finish. But I can point to dozens of individuals who that's the case, who are crushing it and doing amazing. Still not only attending church, but giving, serving, loving Jesus, have families. And there's also individuals, of course, are superstars who finish and are doing the exact same thing. So
yeah. Do you find those people want to continue to be part of the program?
Yeah, you mean the graduates?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, many graduates go on to not only serve, donate, be speakers, advocates, ambassadors on our behalf everywhere they go, but also staff members. And we just hired a staff member last week, or hired a graduate of our women's program in Western Washington. And she starts December 1st, actually.
Yeah.
Because the current staff member over there is transplanting and coming over here to Coeur d'Alene to start our women's program over here. So she had to be replaced. Well, discipleship works that way. She's been trained up and just duplicate. And here we go.
Do you guys link up with other nonprofits in the area? Like here, you might link up with the Union Gospel Mission Women's Center over there, those types of things. Do you guys actively pursue those things, or do you just kind of like let that stuff happen organically?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is part of staff's full-time role. A piece of their pie is dedicated to networking, and that's important. It's a big deal. And yes, we've got a relationship with UGM and their women's program specifically over here. And our first member who's going to be joining our women's program here on December 1st, I believe she's slated to move in, is a graduate of UGM.
That's quite a program they got over there.
Yeah.
Those two programs, your program and their program coupled together, could really be a pathway to great success for a young lady.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess I would imagine that that's a little bit more difficult with the women, because especially if they're bringing children with them. Is that something that you guys deal with on the women's side?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, and I've heard that before, but that has not been our experience. I mean, everybody's got their own ideas, but our women's programs have been just as successful or even more successful as our men's. And I think at the bedrock of that is the culture that's developed by staff and leadership. It's a culture that's set, and we just love people at a high level. We love and take care of our staff at a high level, and that creates staff members that are able to focus their lives on these individuals. They're not having to, if stress is less at home, you can be a better investor in people at work.
So it ends up just being a little bit more of a logistical problem.
Yeah.
Because you're out there having to deal with kids. You got to deal with daycare. You got to deal
Sure.
with, diapers or whatever, So, yeah, I mean, I imagine it becomes a little bit more of a statistical or logistical problem.
Yeah. And they're not our kids.
Yeah.
We make that very clear to you, the member who's in the program. This is your child, right? I mean, that's all in the paperwork. You are a parent, and you've got responsibilities and an understanding of how you are to take care of your child while you're enrolled. And it's all in our intake paperwork.
Do local legal guidelines change quite a bit when you have children involved in the housing?
No. Again, because these are individuals in their quote unquote their own housing environment. They just happen to have children with them. Now, as an organization, we have standards that we put on the members,
Sure.
Residents, we call them members, and an understanding of how this is going to go with you and your child, right? I mean, we've got crystal clear understanding on paper. Your child has to be within your line of sight at all times.
And you've already got the whole, no sex offenders, no registered sex offenders. That's
Yep.
already a prerequisite. So
Yep.
that's out.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, this is a heartbreaking thing to think about, but do you guys experience any full-blown relapses, people falling back completely into the lifestyle they were living? And how do you deal with your staff when you deal with that kind of heartbreak?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is a reality that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I got to speak out of my own life. I remember working for that initial program, Teen Challenge, and encountering the first individual that I had invested a ton of my life in and watching them make a bad decision and go down the road, right? And unfortunately, that's a reality that you get more accustomed to it. And I guess you do get calloused. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
However, my relationship with Jesus and constantly plowing my own heart and keeping his heart at front and center, keeps me as soft as possible. But it is so difficult. It is so difficult. Every single staff member that we have that's new, and it's a process to walk with them through that. Tears.
Yeah.
And you don't invest your life in people and believe the very best without it affecting you when they make decisions that take them a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a kind of a caretaking lifestyle that you could become very jaded in very quickly.
Yep.
So, what do you guys do to kind of help to get ahead of that caretaker depression, caretaker anxiety? What are you doing for your staff to kind of help them to alleviate those kind of issues?
Yeah. Well, I can speak out of my own life and then how that translates to staff. Self-care, as the industry would call it, is critical.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. We try very hard to emotionally care for staff, and really, it's a big family. I know it's cliche a little bit, but are very intentional about caring for them just in their compensation package, as well as, so every staff member, not only are they salaried with full medical and dental at 100% premiums, but also a vehicle that's, again, fueled, maintained, and insured, and with retirement. And a lot of them, it does include housing, and they're able to feel well taken care of. It is ministry, right? So people aren't, it's not comparable, I don't think, necessarily to non-ministry work in salary and what they're taking home necessarily. I think everybody could go out and make more money, quote unquote. But we are super intentional about doing everything that we can. We've developed a fundraising structure, actually, that allows staff members to go raise their own support. And I think that's at the bedrock of that. We've got a line item in our budget that's Staff Emotional Health Fund for investing in people, in our staff. And they're the bedrock of what we do. We can't do, I mean, that's the most important piece of everything, is how healthy we are as a staff.
That's pretty great. So they get, they can take a base salary and then they can raise their own support
above and beyond. Yeah.
That's a pretty great way of doing that. And then you can get tied in with your local kind of ministries if you're clever. Do they get any kind of training on how to proceed through that, or are they kind of just on their own to try and figure that out?
Yeah, it's relationships. So, I mean, there's initial training on, it's not meant for standing on a stage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When staff members do that, that's for the organization.
Yeah.
When a staff member goes out and we create pamphlets for everybody, little trifold pamphlets with their name on it and their staff giving code, and it's their initials, first, last name, initials, followed by the last 4 digits of their phone number. So when people put that in the donation field on the website, they know it's going to that staff member. And we tell them, hey, you should be dedicating, I believe our staff manual says, I believe it's an hour a week, out of the minimum 40 for this.
For kind of personal, physical kind of development.
Yep. And to go sit down, ask Ken, hey, Ken, you want to go to coffee? Well, Ken knows I'm in full-time vocational ministry. Yeah, let's go. And sit down like, my life's been transformed. This is what I'm doing now. Would you like to invest at $25 a month in supporting me as I run headlong, and give my life to this? And so the staff member retains, I believe it's 80 or 85% of that, and they get it paid out quarterly. And it's a massive, it doesn't apply to me, but it's a massive gift and benefit to full-time staff as they just consider their life and their what they need, So and it puts them in charge.
Yeah.
I think, transparently, it was after so many years of an organization and, initially it was just me and my wife, and then you add more people, and the budget gets bigger, right? And it's like, man, it's just crushing, right? It literally is crushing. And like, okay, how do we spread the responsibility out? Well, if you want to earn more above and beyond, right? Well, let's put the responsibility on you. You've got a sphere of influence that I don't have. And I think it works really well. And people love it.
But it's more of a personal approach. Like if they were to go like on a podcast with some stupid pastors, it wouldn't be like for self-promotion. That would be like, okay, we're going to promote the organization. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, okay, so what kind of people are you pulling for this job? Because it's a calling.
Yeah.
Like, where are these people coming from?
Yeah. Addiction. Yeah, for sure. So not on the admin side necessarily, our business administrator hasn't come out of addiction themselves, nor their counterpart. We've got 3 admins, but everybody else who's working with the individuals, that's in their background.
Yeah. Any of them come out of the Absolute program?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. On the women's side, Kylie, Renee, and Alyssa, who we just hired, they're all products of the program and have come through and are doing
that's
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Joe at the men's campus in Western Washington. So, yes, they're definitely sourced ideally out of our program, and they make the best staff members. Our staff team is incredible, superstars, literally doing the heavy lifting every day, waking up right alongside the members in their scheduling and taking them to work, taking them to their DOC appointments, picking them up, taking them to the dentist, doing life right alongside them. Yeah.
So you're opening a women's residency in Coeur d'Alene. You already have a men's house, right?
Yeah. They're
How many
duplexes.
guys are there?
Yep. Yeah, the duplex for men has a capacity of 16, and then the women's will have a capacity of 18. And we signed the lease on November 1st, and it's a sprint for the new women's facility to get it up and ready, and with the goal of December 1 opening. And we've got ladies slated to come in, so we're excited.
How's the men's facility? Is it already full?
Yeah, we've got, I believe, 11 individuals there right now. So we're not totally full. Yeah. Yep. And we get a lot of individuals we actually been routinely going into the Kootenai County Jail. And there's a lot of people in there who've come through programs in the past. They've already, for what we've already talked about, they finish a program. They walk out. They don't have any of that structure on the inside that has made them successful. And they tip over. And their probation officer picks them back up. They're sitting in county and going, gosh, what happened? And then,
now what do I do?
Yeah. And our staff member walks in and says, hey, you want to learn how to live? Let's walk this out. And they're thrilled. And yeah, it's a great fit.
Good deal.
So if a individual listening to this podcast desired to support Absolute Ministries, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah. The easiest way is to go right online. It's on our website on a Give tab. And there's a myriad of ways, like we've already talked about, whether it's mentoring or being involved in a fundraising committee. I mean, we put on a couple events a year, being a business sponsor.
And that's absoluteministries.org, correct? Okay.
Yep. Or just direct one-time gifts, monthly gifts. Those options are all on the website. And again, when individuals sponsor and help the organization, they're partnering with individuals that have major skin in the game. These are not handouts. These are facilitating a new way of life for individuals that are genuinely dedicated to walking this out. And our costs are about $2,500 a month per member served. And the individuals pay roughly half of that. Our tuition is $1,200 a month, and that's all inclusive. And then we fundraise the difference on their behalf.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, man, it's been good having you. Really appreciate your time and appreciate what you're doing. Do you have any final words for our listeners? Anything that you'd like to just say?
Yeah, two things, I think. Number one, just hope for you in the midst of whatever you're going through. And when you consider the loved one in your life who, man, from the outside looking in, you're like, where is the path forward? But I just want you to know that that was me also. And God is and can do what you are certainly unaware of. And he loves your mom, your dad, your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, very much. And I would say, though at times looking at the circumstances, it's bleak. And you're like, man, I do not see the path forward. And you got two options. You can laugh or cry. And a lot of the times we cry, right? But let's just remember who sits in heaven. And I'd like to just pray for everybody who's listening and for your loved ones specifically. This is for you and your loved one, Lord. You know exactly what's going on in their life. You know exactly the circumstances, the craziness that has happened to get us to today. God, none of that's lost on you. And God, you also know how much you love this individual and how much they mean to you. You've created them. And so, God, I ask right now that you would soften their heart, that you would call them to yourself, that maybe you'd even use this podcast somehow to reach them so that they could experience hope on the inside, that there is a path forward, God, that you would do what only you can do and soften their heart. And for the individual who's their advocate, for the family member or the loved one who's listening right now, hope is alive.
Amen.
Hope is alive. And we would love to talk to you about what making healthy decisions looks like. If you want to call our 800 number, and if you want to, talk to somebody about making sure you're not enabling. We have those conversations all the time. And yeah, we'd be happy to do that. In Jesus' name, I say all those things. Therein lies the power. In the name of Jesus. The other thing I wanted to say is just one other cool thing about the organization. Our workbook has actually been accredited by Faith International University. And so the individuals that go through our program receive up to 45 credits towards their undergraduate degree by completing Absolute Ministries. And that's another thing that differentiates us from any other organization doing similar things. Yeah, so an individual that goes through our program can be like the equivalent of completing a year of full-time college at an accredited university. And they are a great partner of ours, believe in our work, and are walking this out alongside us. So very cool opportunity for those in our program also, yeah.
That's really great. It's really great. Ken, do you have any final words for us?
Yeah. I mean, this topic is kind of personal for me. I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind here as we close. One is it's personal for me because I've watched my dad go through rehab programs for alcohol multiple times. The last time was 9 months inpatient. I watched him come straight out, and within the week, he was back at the VFW draining it. He did not have Christ in his life. It's close to me also because I have a stepsister who went almost all the way through the UGM women's program over a year. And she came out the other side. She's doing a lot better. And I believe the difference was Jesus Christ in her life.
Amen.
And so I see the value of these. And, we think about, we're asking you to support Absolute Ministries here, obviously. And we've talked on this podcast and elsewhere in sermons about, part of the problem in our culture was we ceded over to the nanny state, the government, issues like this to take care of people where the church used to take care of people and no longer does in a lot of cases. And so you could say, well, I pay taxes to the county and to the state, and there are programs. There should be places. Are there not poorhouses? Christmas season, here we go back to Scrooge, that kind of thing. And no, there aren't. The government does not provide these kind of services, and we live in a complex culture to where you can't just walk out of a detox program and start a successful life. It's just not going to work. And there's a huge, huge need for ministries like this. And so you can be a person who makes a difference by helping to support Absolute Ministries and help make a huge difference in someone's lives and be part of the solution instead of the problem. And we just encourage you to do that. Consider it, pray about it, and then make a decision for yourself.
Amen. Amen.
So good.
Well, Cameron, thanks, man. Appreciate you being here. Yeah.
Thank you guys. It
Oh,
was a
man.
blast.
Our pleasure. We'll have to have you back sometime, talk about something different.
Love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's do it.
But yeah, thanks a lot, man. And really appreciate, the work that you're doing. There's definitely a gap there that I see that it's nice to hear that someone is out there and is paying attention to that gap. So, man, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, man. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment or a question or an idea for an episode, send us an email at 3p@ethelbaptistchurch.org. If your idea gets used on the show, you could be the proud recipient of the now world infamous 3P coffee mug, which does indeed make your coffee taste better. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with all your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again to Ethel Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who could do the same. And with that, we are out.